Business podcast. I'm Jess Dewell, your host, and guess what? Guess what? Today is like every other day, and it is unlike every other day because it has never happened before. So while I woke up, while I've had my breakfast, while I'm getting into the swing of things, as you are doing the same, and different parts of your day, there is a little bit of a routine here. There is an expectation of what happens when we get to our day that has never happened yet. And we're talking about productivity today. We're talking about optimizing our time because I know you, if you're like me, we're always looking for ways to get more time. And so, how do we do that? What does that mean? And maybe we can shift our thinking just a little bit. That's what we're going to be talking about today in the live program. So, here's the deal. We are live on LinkedIn, we are live on Twitter, and we are live on YouTube. So, wherever you are tuning in, and for those of you listening to this in the podcast feed, mark your calendars. Come look. Let's see what's going on so you can join in the conversation in the live moment as well as after the moment when you're doing your part of your routine, part of the day where you're improving yourself. You're taking time to listen to other people. You're taking time to learn and see what's out there. You are taking the time to invest in yourself in a new and different way. Now, here's the deal. Red Direction gives away a ton of content for free, like this podcast. We also have programs like the Fast Track Your Business program, like Strategy Intensive Days, like other things too that are escaping me, but you can find them at reddirection.com. The point being is you will get so much value here that you will take something away from this program. And it is so valuable that if you ever want to go deeper, if you ever want more, just reach out to us, reddirection.com, and find out what the next best step might be for you to continue moving toward your goals, your strategy enactment, the engagement in how you show up to actually get results to go with the work that you're doing. Now, one of the things that I think is really important to think about and where this topic has come from is the conversations that I'm having with clients and peers today. The last 45 days have really been about, I don't know how to manage my time. I'm being pulled in a lot of different directions. I don't understand what is the most important. And these are people like you that have a plan, that know where they're going, that actually have goals and tasks that are helping them move toward those bigger goals. Yet, we still have this feeling of, I could be doing more and I'm not doing enough, and maybe a whole bunch of other things in that particular container. Well, we've got to take that particular container and we've got to set it aside. We want to set it aside specifically because it is important for us to recognize and think about productivity in a new way. Now, most of us think of, productivity, let's do more in less time. What can I delegate and get off of my plate? How do I do all of these different things so that I can get more time? Well, I'm not sure if any of you have experienced this, but the more that you do any of those things, the more you're managing those things to get you more time. And that is actually something that we have to think about, that we have to recognize that the more we put into place to optimize our time, the more we're managing those things. And at some point, even the management of those processes gets grindy. And when that stuff gets grindy, it makes everything else harder. It makes everything else less exciting. It makes everything else slow down quicker. And the reason it might get grindy is because we're not getting results. Well, why wouldn't we be getting results? We've optimized our time. We've time blocked our day. We are dedicated and focused into here's what we're going to do when. And that's a really good discipline to have. Yet at the same point in time, one of the things I notice is that as you're working with that, it becomes all about getting things done. And the focus on getting things done is busy in disguise. That getting things done, that just filling up that time, that managing of those processes, that making sure you're sticking to the calendar and the time blocks and all of those types of things means that accidentally you ended up like a hamster on a wheel. Well, the hamster chose to be there, but you didn't. And that's the thing I think that we really want to think about and look at first. Did we accidentally become a hamster on a wheel because of the productivity choices and plans and processes that we really liked and make us feel good because we can see output? Not all productivity is quantifiable. We just experience it because we get different results. So the rigidity is another thing that comes out of it. We get so bogged down in the rigidity of the process that we aren't able to shift. We don't recognize an opportunity when it comes along. We are closed to reprioritization based off of what is showing up in the world compared to the plan that we have made. And I think that that's a really key piece, which is, by the way, another kind of busy. If you are so dedicated to making sure you're doing this thing at this time, no matter what, you will get results for a period of time. It could be a long period of time. I mean, this could be years. At some point, though, all of a sudden the results are going to stop and it's going to be like, well, what happened? Well, there was an inability, an inflexibility to see anything outside of that process because it was so good and it was so optimized and so much got done. So, what does it actually mean to be productive and get stuff done in a role where we're doing a lot of thinking and talking and deciding and oversight and a lot less doing, acting, managing, outputting? I think that's really what we're talking about. We have to make that shift away from we're getting stuff done into are we moving things forward? And it feels different. You might get done at the end of the day. I will today. I'll get done at the end of the day and I'm like, I had all these things to do and boy, oh boy, I got those checked off. Did I also make forward movement? Those are the things that tend to not get put onto our priority list. What are the things that I know I must do? Okay, cool. What are the things that deadline are necessary? Cool. And then this third part is, well, what else can I consider? Where do I need to be a little more creative? Where could I get clearer? What is the thing that I need to be thinking about next? Now, one of the things that you hear me talking about on a regular basis is this thing that I have created called a present retreat. It's CEO time, right? It's a period of time that is dedicated to being present, to taking a step out of the busyness of the day-to-day, the demands and the interactions and the interruptions, and really spending time evaluating, reflecting, dreaming, prioritizing. And without that step out, right? The retreat part, there's two kinds of retreat. There's the retreat, we got to step out and take stock. And we also can, go to the spa and relax a little bit. Yes, when we have that time that we have protected and we're bringing it to the forefront in one day a week, that would be something that allows us to have a little bit of a spa day. It's a different mindset that is required of us. We don't have a to-do list per se. We're creating our future to-do lists. And that's the part where we have to flip that switch to really be productive as an executive in your organization. And as you are moving up into the role you're in, into a manager, into a senior manager, director, all the way up to SVP and VP and higher, here's the thing. As you get to those higher and higher roles, the less and less you can quantify the work you do in a day. There's ambiguity there. And we forget that too. It's hard because we know we're like, ooh, we can quantify what we've done. We can wear that. We've got that. Yet at the same point in time, a lot of the work that we do is removing obstacles for others. There is no checklist for that. It's what's showing up. How do you get in the middle of it? How do you remove it? And how do you enable and empower your people to do what they need to be doing? And that's also in line with the strategy, right? There's a lot of thinking. There's a lot of thoughtfulness that's involved. And by the way, I'm not sure if you know this, but maybe you do know this. I know you feel it and you might think it. Well, when I am thinking and when I am creative, I'm not productive. And that is incorrect. And I'm going to tell you why it is incorrect in just a minute. And here's the thing. One of the things that I noticed about the reports that came in from 2021 and what's coming out and what the priorities are in 2022, our business preparedness report, that is something that you can go to reddirection.com and get. It has broken down the activities and the interests and the priorities that people like you have set for 2022. And they also shared where they fell short and what they thought of their 2021. And by the way, these are similar issues that happen all year after year. So even when you watch this, your future self comes back to listen to this program because that's what good learners do. They revisit the good content filled, action oriented, thought provoking programs, podcasts, documentaries, TV shows, fiction books, nonfiction books, all of it, right? Wherever we can get that idea and inspiration, we can go back to those. Oh, by the way, that's a part of productivity that I'm going to just stick in right here. Revisit the things you found useful to find out if they're still useful, because that's part of our reflection process. As long as they're still useful, we're like, cool, let's keep grabbing onto that. If we don't resonate with it anymore, or we've moved past that, or we've achieved what we needed to achieve, and we're still using an old idea, an old inspiration to move forward, we might end up getting stuck. We might lose momentum. We might not be getting the results we want, even though we think we're being productive because we learned it in the past. Skills evolve, just like technology. Skills evolve just like each day when we show up and we decide how we're going to engage in it. Okay, so that report, right? That business preparedness report, business transformation. Here were some of the takeaways across the companies that submitted. 35% of the leadership teams that reported in said that strategy and execution was the top priority. Productivity falls right into that. Now, 31% of the leadership teams that reported in also said that communication and leadership was their top priority. Okay, so 2 of the 4 main areas showed up as over 30%. And this is important because communication and leadership is also about prioritization. It is also about optimizing in a different way than getting the work done. So, for those of you who subscribe to Inbox Zero, awesome. I'm proud of you. That is an aspiring thing. It's so low on my priority list, though. I haven't made that shift, and you get more time from that. Let's be real. There are things you are or are not doing that get you more time. So it's what you're doing with that extra time. I do other things to get extra time, but I'm thinking about Inbox Zero for whatever reason. It just popped into my head. So this concept of you touch it once in your inbox and it's out means that your inbox is no longer your to-do list. That is an important thing because when we make a shift of something that we used to do to get to something new, everything looks different. It's like a kaleidoscope. Everything looks different. So when we think about strategy and execution, when we think about communication and leadership, what does that mean in relationship to prioritization? Well, the idea is the clearer, I shouldn't say the idea is, let me just tell you, here's what I think, because that's what this podcast is about, what I think and what I have to say to you today. So in this concept, right, we're talking about clarity. When we know what the strategy is and it is clear, then we have the ability to communicate it easily in a way that is received and understood by others. I came up with this phrase actually talking with doing some work for myself. I was asked a question and I was like, well, how do I answer this question that doesn't really have an answer? And I'll even tell you, because while it doesn't relate to business, I actually used a business decision-making process with it, or a business interaction process with it, okay? I was asked, well, what is your definition of horrible? And how do you know you're horrible? Okay, so this is self-reflection work. Very important in leadership, very important to build compassion, to be understanding, to understand where could we find information different than ourselves and continue to grow and develop and make sure that we're showing up, okay? So in that work, I'm like, well, I don't know. That's a really big loaded question. So I'm going to have some emotion about it. Any big decision that we have that we're trying to find clarity around, we are going to have emotion. And when we recognize that emotion and bring it to the table, we are doing a great service. We are doing a great service to ourselves and others because by going, yep, there's the emotion, it's at the table with us as we're working through this question, this concept, this problem, this issue, then we don't have to let it control us. And we're also not doing the work through the lens. It's at the table and it adds, but it doesn't is not the primary. So then the second part of that was, well, the equivalent of a brainstorm, I did some journaling around this one. And in fact, this is what I do when I am putting together goals for the organization and for the organizations that I work with also. What are all of the things? There's a lot of conversation. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of inspiration. What did I read last? What's going on in the news? How are our competitors doing it, right? SWOT. Dun, da, 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 SWOT. And when we have that handy, we can also bring it to the table and go, well, we don't want to look at it through any one of those lenses. We want all of those to inform what we're doing. And then it's, well, what do we think? How do we say it? What is going on? And what comes up in terms of how does this look? Well, it turns out I don't have a single definition for horrible. I have a range of horrible. And it depends on where you're at and where you're coming from and what's going on. By the way, very similar to a lot of things we're doing in business. How do we know we're successful? It depends on what's going on, what's showing up, and how we're responding. So you take that, and then it's like, okay, so now you've got this nut, and it's usually really big. Can you say what needs to be said? I call them thought bubbles. Can you need to say what needs to be said in a thought bubble? Because as soon as you can get that thought bubble in place, you can start using it and testing it out. Is it clear? Did that person understand what I'm saying? How are they showing up? Can they take it and apply it to their role without being overwhelmed with too much information and without being underwhelmed and going, whatever, that's not going to stick, right? We need that person to receive it. So those thought bubbles are incredibly important. I don't want to call them principles because they're not. I don't really want to call them best practices because they're not. They're these things that will change as we grow and change as an organization that can just allow us to ensure we come to the same place and have connection as we are building our company together. All the people that are coming to work every day to work with you, to do the job that they have been hired to do, to be responsible and accountable for it. Because good productivity isn't measured in what the result is of actually getting stuff done when you're at the high senior level executive and leadership positions in an organization. It's how many people understand so that they have less obstacles and they know how to prioritize the actions that get stuff done in that day. I'm not saying you don't have stuff to do. You have a lot to do. It just looks a little different. And it helps empower those people that are working with you to do their job well. So I was going to say, Scott is in the background, by the way, so I'm going to just do a quick shout out to Scott. If you either come on or text me, could you tell me what I was going to tell people more of? I recognize that, and I was really excited about it, but now I can't. So while he's telling me what I was going to come back to, I want to tell you a little bit more about this report. This report, the Business Transformations for 2022, our Business Preparedness report, it actually breaks down leadership into the Cardinal Directions, north, south, east, and west. And what it does, and it really doesn't matter which one it is. What matters is, are you focusing on strategy and execution? Are you focusing on communication? Are you focusing on the other ones? Because if you are, the only way to know you're going in the right direction, think about a compass, is that you've aligned your compass up so that if you're going east, that you know you're going east. You're not accidentally going north. You're not accidentally going west. You're going in the direction that you want. So when we think about the cardinal directions, it's not because we have a true north. Well, we all do, but we're not using our true north. We're actually using the true north to make sure of business and how we do business and the way businesses run and can be successful. And what are we focusing on so that we know we're going in the path that we want to go as long as we want to go there. Because even if we're just a little bit off, we can get way off in the future if we are not careful at the beginning. And that comes back to one of the things, that clarity, that thoughtfulness work, that work that doesn't have a checklist box, that might not feel very accomplished, that might make you leave you feeling unaccomplished at the end of the day or the end of the week or the end of the month. And it's amplified when we don't have results to go with it. And so we know that we're doing the right work, we're prioritizing the right things because we've aligned and made sure that all of our goals are clear in relationship to the direction that we're traveling. We've brought all the pieces to the table, and I was using kaleidoscope earlier. I know kaleidoscopes really don't go in a backpack when you're hiking, but it's kind of this thing that keeps showing up, so I'm gonna stick with it. So we have our compass and we have our kaleidoscope and we have all of the other pieces. And this is where the amazing piece of productivity is. This is where the secret sauce of your company, the way that you do your work, the way that you serve your customers comes together. That competitive advantage will come together with these things and know that you are gaining traction. Because one of the things that I did notice in those search results that is talked about in this report, remember, you can get it, it's free. Go to Red Direction and get it, reddirection.com and get it, is that people said that they were interacting with their strategy, yet they weren't getting results. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I'm glad y'all are listening. You're like, yes, I'll talk about my strategy more. Good. Now, so that's good. When you're not getting the results you want, it means something. It means there's a lack of clarity. It means there's a lack of alignment of action to initiative. It means there's a misunderstanding somewhere along the line. It could mean you think you're going east, but you're going south. And how do we catch those? That's where true prioritization gets us farther. That's where, when we're thinking about when do we spend time working on removing obstacles, making sure that we're doing the right things at the right time. Because I think people mistake, this is the thing, productivity with decisions. I've made the decision, now I'm going to go get it no matter what. Well, guess what? Sometimes we think we have to make decisions for all time, and that's daunting. So we get stuck, or we slow down, or we don't do enough, or we hedge, right? That's where that ambiguity could come from, or excuse me, the lack of clarity can come from. We're hedging. Well, the more laser focused we can get, the more we know where we're going, the more commitment we can put behind it, the easier it is for those who have hitched their missions to ours can come with us. They're like, oh, all right, I get this. I know how I fit in. I know what I can do. I might even see how I can do my role better. I might even come up with a new idea of how we can change the experience for our customers. All of these things not only allow us to get more done, it allows us to adapt as we go, candidly, radically shifting as we want to, as we would like to, as we need to. I still haven't heard back from Scott, so I apologize to y'all about that, that I might not have answered the question. I said something and I'm not going to be able to get back to it. I know I said it, but I don't know what it was. Welcome to the world of Jess. And this is one of those things where it's like, yeah, that's good. We'll come back, make a tease, and so sorry. There's other good content in its place, however. And I'm going to start with this, right? We've talked about we don't want to accidentally be a hamster on a wheel. We've talked about the fact we don't want to be too rigid. We've talked about the fact that we really need to know where we're going and the clarity. And here's that practical example again, is what's at the table that's showing up? Is there emotion? Is it our SWOT? Is it somebody? Is it internal? Is it external? And understanding all the pieces that are there so that we can look and decide what decision needs to be made. And based off of the decision that can be made, we understand and prioritize the actions. Because in the end, what we say we do and what we actually do when unaligned don't get us anywhere. Stalemate, right? It's like, it's physics. You hit, the balls hit, and then they stop. They might back up a little. So if you have two balls, they come together and they hit in the middle, what happens? They lose their momentum immediately. It crashes, and then there's basically no momentum left. And we need everything to keep going. So things in motion tend to stay in motion. We use that law of physics. And we don't want anything to get in the way of staying in motion in our organizations, especially ourselves. So quit disguising productivity as something it's not. And so what can you do? You really can be thinking about the rituals, right? Can we get the right mindset? Can we do what we need to do? How might we show up in the world to remove obstacles, to allow for more creativity, more flexibility? Because we don't want to be too rigid. We want to be optimized without being stuck in a rut. Because the deeper our rut, the harder change is. We don't make decisions forever. We make decisions for right now. And when we can embrace making the decision right now, it might only get us to tomorrow. It might only get us to the next quarter. Yet it's a decision that keeps us tiny course correcting. Some would call pivot, tiny course corrections along the way to keep going where there's going. So the least amount of friction is slowing you down. And that's what it's all about. Looking for the places. Productivity is looking for the places that slow you down, where that friction is at, and figuring out how to get rid of it. And what it's trying to tell you. How do you get rid of it? And is it trying to tell you something? Because sometimes it's the course correction that gets rid of it. Sometimes it's a change of action. Sometimes it's a lack of clarity, increasing clarity can reduce that friction. Sometimes it's being able to take a step back and go, whoo, my industry is actually going through a disruptive cycle and it's impacting me. I didn't think I was going to be impacted by that. Well, I am. Now what? I have to lead my team through this. What does that mean? Being able to look out past everything going on, being able to see how things are shaken out, because they will. And if you're not disrupted right now, you might be. And you might be seeing the results of them, and it may show up as a 2x4, unexpected. It also might be something that ends up becoming a big deal because a whole bunch of little paper cuts over time don't hurt as bad as a great big 2x4 does, right? It shows up differently. And by stopping, by using that concept of a present retreat, you can actually find some of those ahead of time and see a wider lens, understanding what you've got going on, where you are going. So I'm going to go back to this report piece because as we're talking about some of that, the lack of results means we need more thought bubbles. We need more clarity. Even though we're engaging with a strategy, even though we're talking about it, even though we're bringing people along, even though we're letting everybody know around us, here's what we're doing, here's what we're going, and these are the results we want. Being able to laser focus in. I was in a mastermind this morning with a group that I'm a part of, and I have to tell you, one of the things that came out of all of the discussion today was that being specific, dedicated, and committed to a course of action. So once that thought bubble is created, once the initial decisions have been made, being able to adapt and make new decisions is incredibly important. Yet being committed to the path that you're on is also important. One of the things I recognize sometimes in myself is that I know my team has described me in the past this way, and I work really hard and consciously make sure I'm not doing this anymore. It still sneaks up on me sometimes because I am human, but it's the spaghetti on the wall. Here are the 10 things we're going to try. Or it's well, let's try this. Well, let's try this. Well, let's try this. Well, because we did those, let's try this. And nothing got the time that it needed. So another part of productivity actually is giving something the time that it needs to work. And we're all going to be different. You know somebody who tries something new and it seems to be effortless and instantaneous. They get the results they want. And sometimes you might be that person. Other times you might be that person that's like, man, this is the slog. I don't know. It feels like it's too hard. Why is it hard? And that we have to understand, is it disguised as something that's holding is that mindset, or is it truly hard? Because there's this concept of, well, of course, when we're learning new stuff, it is going to be difficult. Well, of course, when we say we're committed, things are going to show up to actually test our commitment. When we say we're all in, things are going to show up and make sure that you're all in. So these little cues, goes back to alignment and course corrections that we can use. And I think that that's a really important piece, because a question you can't ask in a survey, but a question that came up for me that might be a little more interesting is, okay, so that didn't happen and that was interesting. But more interesting to me is, well, did they have thought bubbles? And where I was going next is, well, how long did they actually stick with their initiatives? How many times did they go back and try and course correct? How many times did they revisit it? Was it I'm going to try it? Didn't work? Okay, got to try the next one. Compared to, well, if it didn't work, how come it didn't work? Where can I remove the friction? And this is all talking about starting before the beginning, right? Before you have a race, before you have a competition, before you and your team can show up and engage, you have to know where the engagement will be, right? My son's in Little League right now. So we could show up for a Little League game anytime, But if it's not the right time, we'd be the only ones there. He'd be missing his team and the other team to play with. That's something that we have to keep in mind. Where are we going? Is it the right time? And do we know what's actually truly going on? And who knows, right? We need to, is that enough to go, oh man, we just don't have the right schedule. We're just not going to go anymore. We got to try something different. No. We'd be like, how do we get to the right game at the right time? Let's try something different. So we're sticking to getting to the games. We're just going to try different ways to get there if we failed the first time. By the way, that hasn't happened, but the fact it came out of my mouth is something that is in the realm of possibility of happening in my world. We all get excited about that in our house, and we could be early, like days early. So when we're thinking about business transformation, there are 4 areas that I know are important, and they actually relate to the feedback on the survey. And this was a question we asked. We've decided these are the important things that show up year after year after year for leadership teams. So what do we do with it? Right? We're thinking about strategy and execution. We're thinking about communication and leadership. We're thinking about vision and foresight. We're thinking about innovation and development. Well, guess what? Those are big things. And the bigger the thing, you have a few options on how to get it to go fast. How do you get there fast? You do one thing, get there fast, because the more things that you're doing, the more energy is spread out, the more leakage, if you will, there is in your optimized processes to really address and be a part of all of the different things that you have going on for all of the initiatives. And another thing could be you're not giving it quite enough time. And that's what we were just talking about. So let's talk about this all or nothing thing. It's really hard to choose one thing to do. It's really hard to have one initiative. And that is the challenge, I think, with productivity at this day and age where everything moves so fast, and agility and flexibility must be part of the way business is done. And everybody in the organization must have those skills. So how can you build those in? Well, you're doing it by listening to programs like this. You're doing it by taking an interest in investing in yourself and figuring out, what does that mean for my leadership? What does that mean for the way that I prioritize? What can I do differently? Am I clear enough even with myself? That's a tricky one. So regardless of the area, those are 4, they're called Cardinal Directions for a reason. I don't remember the exact reason, but they're the main ones. And then there's the other ones, right? Northeast, southwest. And then there's even more between northeast and east and northeast and north. There's a lot. And so when we think about that, if we have something in every direction that we're focused on, think about tug of war. When you're equally matched and you're giving 2 sides of a tug of war rope the same amount of energy, what happens? There's a stalemate. That happens with initiatives in business too. So to ensure productivity, one big initiative that is in a thought bubble that allows you to clearly communicate and to clearly and quickly switch to decision making during your protected time, your present retreat. And then in the day, today, outside of that present retreat, all of that knowledge comes with you, and it allows you to make snap decisions, quicker in the moment decisions, to reduce fatigue, that decision fatigue that we all face, to reduce the amount of consideration, to reduce momentum loss. And all of those things increase our time. So one big thing. So is it strategy? Is it communication? Is it innovation? That's a challenge in and of itself. That might be what you get to do right now is, well, what is the thing and can I choose it? Because here's the deal. Just because you choose one doesn't mean the other things that are important to the growth of yourself and your business and your team and the serving your clients, it doesn't mean that is not going to happen. It doesn't mean you're excluding everything. It means you automatically say yes to the right things. Because let's say it's innovation. If you decide innovation is the thing you're going to focus on for the next 18 to 24 months, Great. You have initiatives, you have growth goals, you have expectations for your marketing, you have all of these processes in place. Well, let's take all the stuff. Let's take the SWOT. Let's take the emotion. Let's take the interest. Let's take the what's going on in the industry in your kaleidoscope and look at it through that one lens of innovation. How does what we're doing change to support our main innovation initiative? What does it mean to measure, right? What are these constraints? What are these opportunities? That was it. Remember at the beginning, I said I was going to come back and I teased you. That was it. It was constraints. Okay, see, it all does work out in the end. Constraints. When we give one lens and we have one primary focus for our business for a 1.5 to 2 year period, and we look at everything we're doing through that lens, it allows us to understand the skills that are necessary, build them, polish them, make them second nature. It helps us understand that we are making decisions that must align to that constraint. We are making sure that we are saying yes to the things that keep us aligned with that initiative, that big company-wide initiative as we go. And when we're all doing that, we're all building momentum in our own way. It's like all the pizzas that make an avalanche, right? We want the result of the positive part of the avalanche. There's movement, it's quick movement, it's fast movement. And that can only happen when we're all moving in the same direction. So one thing, and what are the initiatives? And if they don't fit the one thing that you've chosen, what makes it not fit, right? That's interesting. It's important. Why is it important if it doesn't fit here? What are the things that are going on? Maybe we find a little bit of ego. Maybe we find a little bit more emotion. Maybe we find that we're actually just copying competitors instead of being true to what we do best. Maybe it's all kinds of other things. So that's the more interesting thing, is choosing one thing allows us to ask better questions, to be more curious about why we're doing something and is it the right thing right now? Because it might have been in the past and it actually might be in the future, but it just might not be right now based off of our initiative. And that is going to be something that is incredibly important. What are our constraints? And the more we put constraints around ourselves in this concept of we're going to do one thing as an organization, let's put everything through the lens of this thing. How does that change our business? How does that create opportunity? Because if we just go, that's an opportunity, but we don't know how it's an opportunity or what makes it an opportunity for us, especially with the direction we're in right now, we end up with drag. We end up with the things that make us lose our momentum. They split our focus. They reduce, it doesn't matter how disciplined they are, they reduce the amount of time and energy that we're able to spend on something. Because the more big things we have, the more we are unable to switch from those big things and actually take advantage of and work with all the little things that come with it. We forget. It's easy to forget. It's easy to forget how many things come from. I was talking to there's a podcast that's coming out. Her name is Emily Morgan, and she has cracked the code and does a lot with delegation. And one of the things that she shared in our podcast, and I'm not trying to be a spoiler, it's coming soon, but one of the things that she shared in her podcast with me was that we forget that when we, for example, in this one concept, her realm of expertise, delegation, when we delegate, people are going to bring us back stuff. And if we have forgotten or didn't make time for the work that's going to come back to us, we become our own obstacle. And that is a perfect example through delegation of what happens when we actually are dealing with strategy. How are we showing up to it? Are we talking about it? Is it really focused the way we want it to be focused? And if we're talking about it and we think we're going in the direction and we're not getting any results, it's kind of like what she said about delegation. We forgot to spend the time or make the time or plan for the time to do the work that was going to come back to us. And by the way, that comes back to we're not necessarily doing the stuff to get done in all of the tasks. We are doing the things that ensure we are aligned to that one thing in our goal for the next 18 to 24 months. This is a longer term thinking than a lot of people are used to. It's shorter term thinking than a lot of people might be thinking about too. I mean, we've got Companies out there with 100-year business plans, which still to this day, with the speed that things are going, might actually be really useful if you're willing to consider what that could be for you. And then on the other side of things, you've got this whole concept of, well, things change so fast, so we're just going to go and we're going to take advantage of the opportunity. Both of them have their pros and their cons, and they're like opposite ends of the spectrum. And so where are you on that scale? Where are you on that spectrum? What does your kaleidoscope look like? How are you working with, thinking about, deciding to interact with all of the things that are showing up? And most importantly, can you thought bubble the main goal for the next 18 to 24 months? Initiative, I know depending on who you are and the size of your company and your culture, you're going to call those different things. And then what are the things that need to be done? So resources, time, energy can all be personnel, the people that we have that could do it, or the people we need to attract to do it. What are all of those things? They become clearer, and they are what allows us to recognize. And when we're reflecting, going, okay, where's the friction? Because remember, prioritization is less about the task list when we're talking about strategy and innovation and communication. It's more about how clear are we? How straightforward and direct and laser focused we are in a direction. And what does that mean with all of the things that we have already around to leverage, to amplify? One of the things, one of the companies that I work with came out wrong one day. It was like there was a light bulb moment, and I said, "That's a Barrett badge," and we both happened to have scouting in our background, so I was trying to say Barrett badge. No, I was trying to say merit badge, and it came out Barrett badge. And so we now have honorary Barrett badges as those light bulbs moments happen for us. So what is a Barrett badge? You could find and discover that just happens when you shift your thinking a little bit. When you say, hey, you know what? We've got this experience. We've got this direction. We're not getting the results we want, but we're focusing over here. What shows up that needs to be acknowledged, that needs to not be in the way of the final decision? Who do we need to talk to? How do we sift through all the information? How do we make the right decision right now? Because everything changes and we will be making more decisions. It is always decision, more stuff. Decision, more stuff. That act to plan. Act to plan. Think about that in relationship to all of this. And one of the other things I want to make sure that you know about is the polls that we put out. This is a time for you to share what is going on in your world, to share expertise, to share stories, because here's the deal. Bold Business Podcasts exists because I was learning so much from other people that I was like, well, somebody else is going to be interested in this too. And sure enough, we have a listener base. Sure enough, people come back for more. Sure enough, we want to learn from each other's experiences. And guess what? You are part of that experience. What have you focused on? And my question to you is go find the polls. They are typically on Twitter and on LinkedIn, and add your experience, add your insight, add your choice to the conversation, because this is how we keep going and growing together. You have full schedules. You have your priorities. One of those things is learning, and you're learning from other people's experiences. Just by the act of doing what you're already doing, stopping by and participating in that conversation allows you to share that knowledge so somebody else can learn from you as well. And that is an incredibly important part of what we're doing at Red Direction. How do we do what we're doing so that when we are talking about it and sharing, we can help other people who were in the situation look at it differently. We can also take a look, we can learn from other people who we see ourselves on the path in the future. And we can be like, ooh, we can avoid that misstep. We're so glad that you get to bring your experiences to help us excel. All right. And I will tell you what, I could keep talking. You know me, I could totally keep talking. Don't forget, we're live here on LinkedIn and YouTube and Twitter. Twitter's new now, which I think is really exciting. And so join us. We are definitely always on air the second Tuesday of the month at this time, 10:15 a.m., 11:15 Mountain. And then beyond that, it will go out on our podcast feed later the same week. So stay tuned, have fun, keep doing what you're doing, and join in the conversation so we can continue to grow